This is really a general thoughts review of Final Fantasy XVI and nothing too in-depth. I've written this script a few times and scrapped everything because this game, let me tell you, it's so distinct and there's so much discourse going on that I felt the strong need to just talk about this game and what people are saying about it. There will be no story spoilers here, so no worries. Before we get into it, probably the biggest point of contention is the gameplay of this game, and it feels like with every release, people get so upset that Final Fantasy isn't turn-based anymore. And clearly, Square Enix doesn't want to be tied to one specific gameplay type. And also, Final Fantasy hasn't been turn-based in years. Sometimes when a game series has been around forever, it evolves and turns into something pretty good. Let's give Final Fantasy a chance to try something new, instead of keep trying to recreate what they've done before. And y'all have had so many Square Enix turn-based games in the last couple years, like, come on. I commend Square Enix for trying something new and trying to keep their series fresh. This is mainline Final Fantasy's first attempt at full action RPG combat. Let's take a look at an example of what combat is in this game. You have your basic attack button for combos, and you also have special abilities with cooldowns that you use the right trigger for. Combat revolves around managing your cooldowns as well as either dodging or parrying enemies for more damage. As you progress, you get ability points to unlock more special abilities or level up the ones you already have. You have a dedicated button to command your best friend to attack enemies or help you out in combat. You have a series of charms that make your special abilities have less cooldown or deal more damage, and also armor pieces that help your stats, like strength and defense. Later on, you can activate a special ability by pressing in both sticks, which puts you in an enraged state, where you can deal more damage and recover some health. I just described God of War. This game is Square Enix's response to God of War. The combat feel, the way abilities work, the way the world map and local maps are laid out, the way you chain abilities together.
The way that he talks, whack! The way that he doesn't even like to smile, whack! Me, I'm tight as fuck!
You literally have a dog companion. This game is just like God of War strictly from a game perspective, because Final Fantasy XVI is composed of two different elements, the world part and the game part. Let's take a step back and talk about the world part. The quality of the game's main story and world building. The devs have said a lot of the inspiration early on was from Game of Thrones, and the way they've developed the Warring Kingdoms and setting here really makes it obvious, but in a good way. The world feels very rich and well lived in, from the details of the map to the plight of the inhabitants. This is not a utopia. There are a lot of struggles surrounding the usage of the crystals and the relationship between the people of Valistasia and the bearers, those blessed with the magic of the crystals. You have a lot, and I mean a lot, of NPCs that make this world feel fresh and very lived in. I love the world of Valistea, the various kingdoms within it, and their struggles. It's a great setting. And the characters are fun too. The Cid in this game is fantastic. Jill is also fantastic. Clive and Joshua and their relationship is also done really well. They really nailed it with these characters. When the game is focused on its main story, it feels its strongest. The plot is interesting and complements the world, the major battle set pieces feel epic, and the impact is definitely there. There are moments in this game that felt so overwhelming in its characters and how they react to the story beats in an emotional way. It genuinely has really good storytelling. The gameplay of this game is so easy. You either get the I just want the story mode, or the yeah duh I've played an action game before mode. And even on that option, it's just way too easy. It's an action RPG and the combat is pretty fun despite the difficulty being a breeze for most of it. I love switching the different icons and it makes combat feel involved instead of mindlessly button mashing. There's some things here that feel like they should be here but surprisingly are not. For example, you're using the power of the icons, these elemental-based gods, and there's no elemental characteristics to your attacks at all. No bonus damage for hitting a fire-based enemy with ice, or hitting birds with thunder, no Pokemon-type matchups, nothing like that. It's all just straight damage. And taking the whole stun or stagger system that the God of War games use, there's no status effects like poison, confuse, haste, etc., you know. Maybe this hasn't been a thing for Final Fantasy in a while. I haven't played one since Final Fantasy XII, but it feels weird to leave out. It's less complicated going in, and I feel that is the intention given the new gameplay style for the series as a whole. To me, you can tell that the developers were trying to make this game for a very certain audience. The Final Fantasy XIV audience. And before any of my Final Fantasy XIV stands condemn me, I'm not throwing any shade at your game. But there's so much in this game that is just straight out of 14, more than I realized given that I haven't played 14. But I really think they set this game for the people who have never played an action game before. For the strictly Final Fantasy only players, you take someone who plays this, and then tell them now to play something like this, it's understandably a big jump. And I think the difficulty takes a hit to appeal to that very specific crowd, and that's fine. I don't expect it to be very difficult. But I wish there was more of a challenge here for the other audience, the one that I would argue is kind of the majority of gamers, those who maybe have played any sort of action game before. When the game is not focused on the main story and its world building, it can be really slow and the world itself can feel very empty. The pacing, I think, is so awful, especially in the first half. The game does not want you to do your own thing. It is not an open world. It's a bunch of little maps you can revisit for side quests and combat challenges. If you aren't doing either of those, there is nothing to do there. No reason to go out and explore this world that they have spent so much time building up. The sense of freedom feels stunted when you are given an empty sandbox and have to wait for the game to put sand in it. This game has the issue every other game in existence has, and it's that some side quests are good, but others are not, and there's no way to tell what's a good side quest and what's a bad side quest. One of the side quests in this game gives you the ability to ride chocobos, and you wouldn't even know it unless you were doing all of the side quests. There are a ton of side quests here, and for the experience and the ability points you get, you're basically required to do them to level up more quickly. I was pretty sour on the early quests in this game because all they give you is 1, more story and world building, a lot of which boils down to the same repeated theme of normal people hating bearers, and 2, the useless crafting items that you get. And not having a tangible, valuable reward felt so bad for a lot of these quests. But as time went on, some of the side quests, especially the main character-led ones, were really strong. When the game part bled into the world part, it was good. And then you get 100 bloody hides for delivering some flowers to some random guy. And most of the quests are for characters that I do not care about or want to, but I'd feel compelled to do them. I can't bash this game for having the same issues that every game has with its side content, but I will bash it for its lack of useful rewards and an overall lack of content that puts more emphasis on doing all the side quests because there is no alternative. If you do not do the side quests for ability points, there's no organic way to level up faster besides roaming the empty world with no purpose. The items in this game are an absolute joke. All there is are crafting materials, and all you can craft are either weapons or armor, which get immediately obsoleted. They become obsolete. Obsoleted's a word, right? They become obsolete by just other weapons you acquire by playing the story. Playing the side quest and just playing through this game, I had literally thousands of crafting materials and nothing to do with them besides either make equipment that was worse than what I already had, or just sell them for gil. Gil is also a joke. You can buy potions or spend an enormous amount of gil on music tracks for your base's jukebox. These cost about 40,000 gil each per music track. And everything else in the game costs like pennies. That's it. The item imbalance feels so bad. I finished the game with about 200,000 gil and nothing to spend it on. Technically, you can buy some more charms for specific abilities you're using, but honestly, I would just spend gil on replenishing the limited amount of healing items that I could hold, and that's basically it. Like, once you have a build that you like, there's no reason to change to other abilities when all that really matters is just straight up damage. There are hidden chests everywhere in the world, but what do they have in them? Useless crafting items, besides the occasional ones that have a music track or aforementioned charm. When a game like, let's say, God of War, gives you a lot of options to increase your health or limit gauge with chests and puzzles around the world that incentivizes you to interact with them. None of that is here. I keep making the God of War comparison out of pure frustration, because I feel like that's a game that has reasons to live in the world it spends so much time creating. It has incentive to explore without being told to. It rewards the player with something more than just additional lore to do things. It feeds into the tangible rewards to make players want to do the side quests, even the bad ones, like delivering soup or picking flowers for people. Besides the side quests, there is a monster hunt board here where you can go and fight enemies that are supposed to pose more of a challenge than what you usually expect. But that's it. For a JRPG, it's surprisingly empty of content besides what seems like a checklist of features. It's absolutely a story-based game, so having this empty canvas of a world in a linear design game is what makes it feel bad to me. I don't need the extra large cup to drink my perfect medium-sized Dr. Pepper. and that's really what this game feels like to me. The game is still good, and I do love the parts that are focused on the most. The overall story, the world building, Clive's journey, the characters, the music, the graphics. But it's the game part for what feels like there was little quality control. I'm honestly shocked with how much it feels like this game did not get baked enough to smooth out the moments between the story. Because when you finish a huge set piece, there's little reason to deviate. And even in its moments of gameplay, I know this is a first for mainline Final Fantasy, but there are still moments in its new combat and gameplay that just feels messy. Sometimes when you're fighting enemies, and if they get, pushed too far away from their initial starting area, they go into this weird, out-of-bounds state and have to just slowly walk back to where they were at, and they get restored full health and just act like nothing happened. It's so weird. This happened to me during a side quest boss fight, and it was just so frustrating. It's a type of quality control like that I'm talking about. Most little basic enemies don't do a dang thing to you, even when they're the same level as you. The only time that combat becomes anything of a challenge or anything that requires thought is when you're dealing with the much larger bosses where you have to manage the stagger bar. And really, these oftentimes just become kind of like the equivalent of a bullet sponge, a sword sponge, an icon sponge. It's not necessarily bad, because executing fun moves is still fun, it just becomes a list of things to do. There's not a lot of challenge. There's none of that risk-reward push and pull. It's just do your abilities to quickly defeat the enemies and keep going. That's the type of quality control that I'm talking about, and an area that I would love to see them improve upon if they follow up another Final Fantasy in this style. I am complaining a lot, sure, but really it comes from a place of disappointment in the finer details of the game being just non-existent. Final Fantasy XVI is not a perfect game, and I think a lot of the excellent parts, like the world building, the plot, characters, and so on, is what's carrying these discussions when people are bringing up Game of the Year. It's not the Game of the Year for me, because there are so many moments between the huge battles, the huge moments in the story, that I'm constantly scratching my head at. But damn it, despite everything, they still made a game that I would get excited to keep playing. I'm not a huge seasoned Final Fantasy player, but I'd rank it somewhere around here if I had to. And again, this really comes from a place of love, because this game, I think, has so much potential to be as great as a lot of people are saying, and it does have a lot of moments in it that are really great, better than what the other half of the internet is saying. But all in all, it is a very, very solid game. I just wish that some of the more finer moments were as tuned and crafted as well as its biggest. But anyway, let me know how you feel about Final Fantasy XVI, and until next time, take care, and thank you for watching.